Welcome to the debate. So, if you look at a topographical map of a mountain range, you get this incredible amount of data.
Right.
Every ridge, every slight elevation change, every jagged rock formation is totally accounted for. It's a highly accurate, comprehensive representation of reality.
Yeah, which is exactly what you want if you're a geologist.
Exactly. But if you try to use that exact same topographical map to navigate like a city subway system, it is completely useless. To get across town, you don't need a perfectly scaled geographical survey of the Earth's crust.
No, you need a simplified diagram with, bright straight lines and colored dots.
Right. Both maps represent reality, but they serve entirely different purposes for entirely different audiences.
Well, we all accept that because the subway map intentionally compresses reality, right? It straightens out the curves, it ignores the physical distance above ground, and it just tells you where the stops are.
Because it's highly functional.
It is functional, but fundamentally, it is a distortion of the actual physical space.
A necessary distortion, I would argue. And that actually brings us directly to our core subject today. We are looking at the professional landscape.
The messy world of resumes and interviews.
Right, specifically how individuals adapt their career histories for different audiences. When a professional modifies their record for a recruiter, or a hiring manager, or a public LinkedIn network, are they simply selecting the right version of the truth to help that audience navigate?
Or does the very act of filtering reality inherently distort and, manipulate it?
Exactly.
It's a critical question, especially when we dive into the source material for today's discussion. We're looking at the Living Professional Record Methodology, or the LPR.
Yeah, the LPR.
And the central premise of this framework is a rather provocative question, which is literally, what version of the truth belongs here?
Right. The methodology explicitly instructs that tailoring a message is a disciplined act of what they call governed selection from a single source of truth.
And my position is that this framework of rendering, which is, the term the material uses, it's a highly ethical, absolutely necessary translation of a unified professional record.
Ethical? That's a strong word for it.
It is ethical because it respects both the absolute truth of the evidence and the specific cognitive needs of the audience. A resume or a LinkedIn profile is not, and honestly should not be, the whole truth. Okay, but
it's a purpose-specific surface created from the living professional record. The doctrine is really clear here. Rendering is not invention. Rendering is governed selection.
I hear you.
Providing exactly what an audience needs, backed strictly by evidence, isn't dishonest. It's just precise, audience-aware communication.
I understand the appeal of that structure. I really do. And while I certainly acknowledge that dumping an unedited, 10-page career history on a busy recruiter,
it's a terrible idea.
Total failure of communication, sure. But I strongly question the safety of this governed selection concept.
Why?
Because deciding what context to leave out, like severe constraints, project failures, or, really complex team dynamics, that can fundamentally change the interpretation of the evidence.
Well, you're just curating.
But when we carve up a professional record into disparate versions of the truth, we cross a very dangerous line from communication into strategic obfuscation.
Obfuscation?
Yes. The surface, no matter how much you claim it points back to a source, essentially becomes the reality for the reader.
Okay, well, let's dig into that fear of obfuscation by actually looking at the exact mechanics of how the LPR framework operates, because there are rules here.
Let's hear them.
The material provides a structural safeguard against manipulation, and it relies on the relationship between compression and rehydration.
Right, the packing and unpacking.
Exactly. The methodology argues that a resume bullet compresses the record. For example, instead of writing led strategic onboarding transformation,
which means nothing.
Right. It's vague, it's inflated, and frankly impossible to prove. So the governed selection demands a source-backed claim. It asks you to write something like, created shared onboarding checklist during high turnover, coordinating manager input to improve consistency for new hires.
Okay.
That is compression. It packs the truth efficiently for travel, but it is not the end of the line.
Because of the interview?
Yes. The interview is where the candidate rehydrates that truth by expanding on the situation, the constraint, the decision, and the learning. This proves the truth isn't lost, it is simply unpacked when the audience actually has the time and context to absorb it.
Okay. Rehydration makes sense in theory, I'll give you that. But it only works if that first compressed bullet wasn't a lie by omission to begin with.
A lie by omission is a bit dramatic.
Think about how people actually use these tools, though. Let's look at the process that gets us to that compressed bullet. The methodology directs candidates to use Tool 3.5C, right? The market translation brief.
Yes, to find relevance.
To isolate only the evidence that supports a specific market lean. So let's say I am targeting a project management role. I'm going through my comprehensive living professional record and I am aggressively filtering out anything that doesn't scream project management.
Because you're applying for a project management job.
Right, but I literally take a highlighter to my past 10 years and only pull out those specific threats. I am creating a highly biased foundation.
It's focused, not biased.
But when I get to the interview, I am only rehydrating the carefully curated sliver of truth I selected for that lane. The crucial contradicting evidence, maybe the times I struggled heavily with organization or, leaned entirely into a different skill set to save a failing project, that remains permanently dehydrated and hidden from the employer.
Well,
the employer doesn't know what they don't know.
But that omission isn't deception. It is relevance. I mean, if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, isn't leaving out project failures just lying?
That is exactly what they're thinking.
And it's a fair fear. But we have to distinguish between a lie and a curated focus. Let's look at the core question of Module 8. It explicitly asks, what version of the truth belongs here?
Right.
Let's actually walk through the audiences the material identifies because they all have vastly different requirements.
Sure.
A recruiter may need quick relevance, right? They have maybe 6 seconds to look at a document.
If you're lucky.
Exactly.
A hiring manager, well, they may need confidence that you can solve their specific problem. A portfolio reader may need deep context.
Mm-hmm.
A referral contact may need a short, repeatable explanation just to pass along trust to someone else. An interviewer may need a story, and a public LinkedIn audience may need a safe, general professional frame.
Right.
Different audiences need different renderings. That does not mean inventing different truths. It just means selecting the right source-backed truth for the moment.
But you're still choosing what they see.
Let's look at how Tool 4B, the rendering decision worksheet, actually works in practice. It forces the candidate to map their audience's cognitive load.
Right.
You literally have to ask, what is the absolute minimum context this specific hiring manager needs to trust my claim? Let me offer a parallel here.
Okay, go ahead.
If a medical specialist requires detailed, granular lab results to diagnose a condition, but a patient only needs a clear 2-sentence summary of their health to understand their prognosis, are we lying to the patient by giving them a simplified rendering?
That analogy doesn't hold up for me, and let me tell you why.
How does it not hold up?
A doctor summarizing a chart for a patient is an objective third party bound by medical ethics.
Well, sure.
They have no personal financial stake in how the patient perceives them. A job seeker, on the other hand, is a highly motivated actor who desperately wants to present themselves favorably to win employment.
Yes, they want a job.
Right. So when a candidate uses Tool 4B, they aren't just deciding what's relevant. They're deciding what context to actively hide. The source material explicitly instructs candidates to leave out context that is emotionally heavy without decision relevance.
Which is good advice for a resume.
But who gets to decide what has decision relevance? What a candidate deems emotionally heavy, perhaps a project where they constantly clash with a difficult manager, or, I don't know, where a major deadline was missed due to their own internal panic, that might actually be a critical indicator of how they handle stress.
You wouldn't put that on a resume anyway.
But the hiring manager desperately needs that information to make an accurate assessment of cultural fit and resilience. By giving the candidate the methodological permission to omit the messy context under the guise of governed selection, you are allowing them to curate a sanitized illusion.
Okay, fair point. The motivations between a doctor and a job seeker are entirely different. The job seeker definitely wants to win.
Exactly.
But the cognitive limit of the audience remains exactly the same. Whether you're a doctor or a job applicant, handing someone 10 pages of raw, unfiltered data when they only have 6 seconds to read it, it's just bad communication.
I didn't say hand them 10 pages.
but it's a failure to understand how human beings process information. And I hear your concern about curating a sanitized illusion, but that assumes the candidate operates in a vacuum where they can just invent whatever surface they want.
Well, they kind of do.
They don't. The framework doesn't give candidates a blank check. The safeguard against that illusion is the strict rules on measurement. Let's look at those rules in the text. Candidates are strictly forbidden from inventing metrics to sound impressive.
Right.
They must stick to supported measures of performance, meaning scale, volume, or activity, like supervised a 14-person team. Or they must use measures of effectiveness, meaning what actually changed, like improved visibility of open items.
Okay.
If a candidate doesn't have a fake percentage to show for an issue tracker, they can't invent one to make the surface look shinier. They have to rely on qualitative value. This discipline ensures that while the rendering is tailored, its core integrity is absolute. It is tethered to reality.
I agree that forbidding fake metrics is a positive step. Honestly, it's refreshing. But let's look at how that tethered to reality phrase when we talk about what the text calls public safe rendering.
Oh, I think public safe rendering is brilliant.
It is the ultimate example of how truth degrades upon rendering.
Let's set the stage for the listeners on what public safe rendering actually is, because it's important. Imagine you're a professional who just spent 2 years untangling a catastrophic data breach for a major hospital network.
A very high-stakes project.
Highly stressful. You handled proprietary patient intake data. You are incredibly proud of the work. But if you put Fix Hospital X's data breach on your public resume or your LinkedIn, you are violating a multi-million-dollar non-disclosure agreement.
Right.
You are functionally punished for your success unless you render it down safely. The framework teaches this professional to render that highly sensitive experience down to something like supported documentation coordination during a regulated healthcare implementation.
Wow.
This preserves privacy, which is a vital part of professional truth, without resorting to generic, meaningless jargon.
But look at the result of that translation. By stripping away the specific client name, the proprietary system they learned, the confidential outcome they achieved, and the massive stakes of the project, the candidate is left with an abstract shell.
It's not a shell, it's a safe frame.
Supported documentation coordination during a regulated healthcare implementation. That could mean almost anything. It could mean they were the lead architects saving the hospital from ruin, or it could mean they fetched coffee and organized PDFs for the team that actually did the work.
Well, the interview clears that up.
But while the source material confidently claims public safe rendering is not weaker, it is governed, I would argue it fundamentally obscures the complexity and the reality of the actual work. It creates a homogenized, generic surface that forces the reader to guess at the actual reality.
I disagree.
And in a highly competitive job market, ambiguity is almost always interpreted as a lack of capability. You are sacrificing truth on the altar of privacy and claiming it's just as strong.
That abstract shell isn't a degradation of truth, it's a legal survival tactic. You are assuming the public resume is meant to be the final word on the candidate's capability.
For some recruiters, it is.
But it isn't designed to be. The rendering is designed to create just enough confidence for the next interpretive event, which is the interview. The public safe rendering protects the boundary of the previous employer while signaling the correct value pattern to the market.
A very vague value pattern.
But when the candidate finally gets into a closed room with a hiring manager, they can rehydrate that experience safely, perhaps maintaining the client's anonymity while detailing the specific constraints of the database they navigated.
Assuming they get the interview based on that vague bullet point.
That isn't a degradation of truth. That is a sophisticated adult understanding of how information moves through the modern economy. The alternative you seem to be suggesting is either expose confidential information to prove your worth or don't claim the experience at all.
No, I'm not.
Neither of those serves the truth. The LPR system forces the professional to document the private truth in their back-end record and generate a safe rendering for the front end. It respects both the audience's right to know the candidate's capabilities and the previous employer's right to privacy.
Look, I am not suggesting people violate NDAs, obviously. My concern is much deeper regarding how this methodology trains professionals to view their own lives.
What do you mean?
Once you start viewing your lived reality as a back-end database from which you can just, query the specific results you want for a specific audience, you lose the narrative cohesion of a human life.
I think that's a bit philosophical for a resume builder.
But a career isn't just a collection of source-backed claims and value patterns that can be rotated like a Rubik's Cube to show a solid color on one side while hiding the chaos on the other. A career is the total sum of its parts.
Right, but you can't put the total sum on a one-page document.
If I have a LinkedIn profile that says, I help teams turn scattered practices into clearer tools, and a portfolio summary that focuses purely on my technical execution of an onboarding checklist, and a referral message that pitches me strictly as an operations coordinator, I am compartmentalizing myself to the point of fragmentation.
You're just speaking different languages to different people.
Yes, the source material argues that different renderings can be truthful without being identical, but at a certain point, aggressive compartmentalization treats reality like a buffet to be cherry-picked. You warn about generic jargon, but this extreme parsing of truth into audience-specific buckets feels like the industrialization of the human record.
Industrialization?
It's governed, sure, but it is just one step away from curated deception.
But human beings are inherently multifaceted. We're not a single, unyielding monolith of truth. I mean, a professional who spent 10 years in the workforce has likely done operations, project management, technical writing, and crisis management.
Sure.
So when they talk to a recruiter who's desperately looking for a technical writer, emphasizing their operations background isn't just unhelpful, it's genuinely bad communication.
I see what you're saying.
The methodology forces the individual to take accountability for that communication. And let's pause and look at where we actually find some solid common ground here.
I'd love to.
Even with your deep skepticism about the potential for cherry-picking and fragmentation, we both have to respect the material's baseline rules regarding modern technology, specifically artificial intelligence.
Oh, absolutely.
The system explicitly forbids letting AI write final surfaces. It demands that any AI use must be strictly governed by a safe source packet and verified against the record.
Right.
This is to ensure no invented claims, no inflated verbs, and no generic professional hallucinations. I mean, in a world where candidates are currently using AI to fabricate entire work histories out of thin air, a methodology that demands strict source-level review and forbids the invention of metrics is a massive step forward for integrity.
I will certainly concede that point. The material's insistence on evidence literacy, the rule that a claim is not proof and proof is not permission, is an absolutely necessary firewall in our current environment.
It really is.
I agree entirely that the instructions to never inflate an ownership verb, like don't say you transformed a department when the evidence only supports that you coordinated a meeting, is a masterclass in professional integrity.
Exactly.
And the requirement to log feedback, to revise renderings when they fail, and store them in a rendering bank so you don't suffer from what they call surface amnesia, that is incredibly rigorous. It forces a level of self-reflection that most professionals simply do not practice.
So you agree the system has merit?
My divergence is purely philosophical regarding the danger of omission. While translation is absolutely necessary in the professional world, we must remain hyper-vigilant.
Vigilant against what?
The moment we start asking what version of the truth belongs here, we have to recognize the immense power we are yielding to the narrator to hide their flaws and amplify their strengths. Governed selection is powerful, but we must acknowledge it is inherently a mechanism of persuasion, not just objective transmission.
And I summarize my position by returning to the reality of the audience on the receiving end of that transmission. Rendering, when strictly governed by a central living professional record, is the most honest way to operate in a complex, fast-moving professional world.
Honest but curated.
It respects the audience's time and their cognitive load. It recognizes that a referral contact simply cannot carry the same nuances an interviewer and equips them accordingly. It maintains absolute accountability to the source, ensuring that no matter how the surface is shaped, it is anchored to hard evidence.
Well, capturing a human career in text is a profoundly difficult endeavor. We are trying to compress years of lived experience, failure, triumph, late nights, and extreme complexity into bullet points and bios.
It's a tall order.
It leaves us with a lingering question. Is truth a single, unbroken monolith that must be preserved whole lest it be destroyed? Or is it a multifaceted gem that requires careful, deliberate rotation depending on who is standing in the light?
There is certainly much more to explore regarding evidence literacy and the deep mechanics of the living professional record in the source material. But, as you navigate your own career and think about the audiences you interact with daily, consider the map you're handing them.
Choose wisely.
Are you giving them a highly detailed topographical survey that leaves them lost in the weeds of your past? Or are you giving them the clear, brightly colored lines they need to reach their destination? Thank you for listening to the debate.